So to start this project, I grabbed some extra 1x6x8 pine that I had laying around, and I brought it over to the miter. Here I cut the pine into 7 pieces at 16 inches. This is going to be the main section of the planter. When making multiple cuts of the same size at the miter, I like to use one board as a template by putting it on top of the board about to be cut and then sliding it to the proper position on the saw. This helps me get accurate cuts every time. In all the scraps that we're making, make sure that you keep them because we're going to be using them later for the smaller section. Once all the boards are cut to length, I take them over to the table saw and rip them down to 3.5 inches wide. You can essentially just get a 1x4 from Lowe's or Home Depot and it'll be the same width. I just decided to use some extra stock that I had. The boards from Lowe's and Home Depot aren't always perfect, so I like to use some Star Bond to fill any gaps or holes that are in the wood. And by using the accelerator with it, it dries within like 30 seconds and then you can sand it right down. If you plan to stain the boards, I recommend to lay them out and find a good grain pattern that looks great from front, but if you're just going to paint it like this one's going to be, then you don't have to worry about doing that. The front board for this too is also going to be cut to 25-inch length. Once we add the 1/8 inch spacers, you'll see what I mean. So to attach the boards together, I use 2 5/8 inch strips that are going to sit on the back of the boards. And then I used 1/8 inch tile spacers to line up all the boards properly. So because this is going to be an outdoor feature, I use Type-On 3, which is supposed to be waterproof, to attach the back boards. I then took 1.25" 16 gauge brad nails and put them through the back into the boards. Just be careful not to cut these strips too thin or else the nails will go through the front. So while the board is setting, since we're about halfway, I decided to make the numbers. Now you could just paint the numbers on or carve them in with a Dremel, but because I got the new CNC, I decided to cut them out with that. However, I didn't like how bulky they were, being that they were 3/4 inch, so I just took them over to the bandsaw and resawed them down to 1/2 inch numbers. Once I had all the numbers cut out, I took them over to the cardboard section and just threw some black spray paint on them. So while the numbers are drying, it's time to put the section where the numbers are going to go onto the main piece. Just make sure that it's even on the top and bottom, and then it's time for glue up again. I'll be using the Type-Bond 3 for this section also. To make sure that it stays on tight, I'll throw some clamps on each side, then grab the 1.25" 16 gauge brad nails. Now for this specifically, only put 4 brad nails into the bottom section that will be hidden by the planter. Don't put any in the top. This will help keep any nail marks from being seen in the front of the board. So instead, keep the clamp on the side and then flip it over and put them in through the back. And now it's time to put the planter on.
I like to put the planters, right at the bottom edge. And the nice thing about having this sidewall here with no engraving, nothing like that, is you can have tall plants or something like that in the planter, and they can grow up, maybe a vine or something go through it. This side is where the numbers are going to be. But for this planter, it's going to sit down the bottom here, kind of like that. And for planter here, it's going to be a 3 and 3/4 inch deep, and that's including the 3/4 inch board here. So I already went ahead and cut 16 inches, which is the same length as the board's going across here, so it's going to sit right alongside of it. And then I went ahead and cut two 3.5 inch, which is the same width as our boards pieces, and I only made them 3 inches long because the bottom plate for the planter section is going to be 3 inches. So you can plant whatever you want up to 3 inches wide, but the entirety of it is 3 and 3/4 inches. So, but for this planter section, you can really make it whatever you want, whatever size you want. But you don't even have to put it in there if you don't want to. So, but I like it. I think it adds a little bit more character. So let's get back into it.
So the planter section of the address box is very variable. You can have it as deep as you want, 3, 4, 5 inches, depending on what you want to put in there. I like to have it sit even and flush with the box width and height itself. I think it just looks a little bit cleaner. So here is one of my mistakes. The board that holds the number was actually a little bit too long because I didn't account for the 3/4 inch at the bottom of the address box. So all I did was throw a dado stack into the table saw and just cut a little section out, and it fit perfect. Now you don't have to do this section if you plan to put just fake plants in the planter box, but if you take a spade bit and drill a couple holes in the bottom of the planter before you install it, it'll allow the water to drain through if you plan to have real plants in it. To attach the planter section to the address box, I used the Craig jig with a couple pocket holes because I know my wife wanted to put some stones and such in there. So just for a little added strength, I wanted to make sure those screws were going to be able to hold up to what she wanted to fill it with. Now I like to use clamps to attach the wood before I put the pocket hole screws in, because sometimes when you're putting the screws in without the clamps, the wood will slip and slide, and it won't make the two boards that are meeting flush. So this just helps prevent that. So you can see there's a little bit of shine to the numbers, and I'm not really a fan of that. So I just took some super fine steel wool and wiped them off with it. So this address box is going to be painted white, and I decided to use an indoor-outdoor white spray paint by Fusion. It came out really nice and real clean, and it went on super smooth. And to make sure that it was protected from the weather, I used a nice thick coat of polyurethane on both the numbers and the address box itself. This one specifically is actually going underneath a porch, so it's not going to get directly wet, but there's still a chance the moisture will get to it. Once the poly dried, it was time to put the numbers on. I'm using the Starbond adhesive medium thick and the accelerant to put the numbers on. 1, because it works really well, and 2, it's really quick. And once the numbers are on, she's ready to go. Hey, if y'all like this video, go and hit that like button for me, and if you want to see more like it in the future, hit subscribe.